Good evening, it's 19:05 in London. I'm Nikki Scott and this is Dave King and these are the Together Talks. Yes, I couldn't stay away from the show. The truth of the matter is that I was in Portugal this time last week, about to go live on Together Talks with our guest, Lauren Lefavre, when the internet went missing. So it feels really good to be back. Thanks, Dave, for carrying the weight last week.
Oh, so arduous. Yes, good evening. Boa noite, as they say in Portugal. Welcome back, Nikki. Still waiting for the gifts. Anyway, we've got a cracking guest tonight with Mark Norbury. Mark is the Chief Executive Officer of UnLtd, which finds, funds and supports hundreds of social entrepreneurs each year. They've got a particular focus on access to employment for the disabled and for young people, and also on improving the connectedness and well-being of people in later life.
Mark also co-chairs the Inclusive Economy Partnership, a collaboration between the UK government, business and civil society to tackle major social issues. And he has over 25 years experience in the charity and social entrepreneurship sectors. Tonight's theme is the role of entrepreneurs in creating social justice, which is a fascinating subject. But before we go there and meet Mark, we asked him before the show to prepare a short video, and this is Mark Norbury.
Hi there, I'm Mark Norbury, Chief Executive of UnLtd, the Foundation for Social Entrepreneurs. We back about 400 social entrepreneurs every year. We find them, fund them, support them from the startup through to early growth of their venture. And they can be doing anything from trying to address food poverty to tackling loneliness to addressing the housing crisis. They're inspiring people. I've been lucky to have 25 years in business and in non-profits, and so it's natural at this point that I would try and combine the best of business and non-profit purpose, which I believe social entrepreneurship is. I hope you've all been okay through COVID-19 and the lockdown and home working. I have to say I feel very fortunate. As you can see, I'm in my home in southwest Surrey. I've been fortunate for a number of reasons. Most of all, spending time with my family. We've got 3 teenage kids, being able to go on long dog walks through the forest, but also just being able to use 5 hours more every day productively. I hadn't realised what a burden the commute was until this period of home working. Anyway, I hope you've managed COVID-19 okay. I know it's been tough for a lot of people, and I'm looking forward to seeing you for the Together Talks this evening. Take care. Bye.
So hopefully the internet is working better than mine was in Portugal a week ago for Mark down in Surrey, and we'll now welcome Mark Norbury live. Good evening, Mark.
Hi, Nikki. Hi, Dave.
Evening.
Fantastic to have you with us tonight. We've got a lot of ground to cover, but in true Together Talks tradition, we'd like to offer you the soapbox to outline some of your thoughts about the theme, the role of entrepreneurs in creating social justice.
Thanks very much, Nikki. Well, the first thing I wanted to note, I'm glad I'm not quite as close as I was to my phone for that recording, so this is very good. I wanted to kind of reflect on 2 aspects of social justice and social enterprise. The first is my belief that economic prosperity and social justice can be happy bedfellows. They're not an either or. And often they're held up to be antagonistic, or there's a real tension between the 2 of them. I'd like to use our current crisis and how we're getting through it to illustrate this point. So as we all know, coronavirus has created a massive health emergency, but equally, it's going to start creating a massive employment emergency. And the UK is facing an unemployment of over 3 million people in 2020, which is a massive increase. The biggest pain of that is going to be felt by low-skilled, low-paid workers and people who face structural disadvantage, like care leavers, like young Black, Asian, and minority ethnic communities, like ex-offenders. And so this really is a social justice issue, not just an economic recovery issue. The long-term scarring on people and communities who are already struggling is going to be really significant. And I think that social enterprises have a massive role to play in alleviating both that social and economic suffering. we already can see the impact that social enterprises have on employment. The UK has 100,000 social enterprises or so, and they've got a really impressive track record in this field. They employ 2 million people, which is 5% of the UK's workforce, and they contribute 60 billion to the UK economy. And it's not just that they employ 2 million people, it's that the nature of those jobs is so much better than their commercial peers. So, for example, for every £100,000 of turnover that a social enterprise experiences, they create 3 jobs, whereas a private sector SME would create 0.66 jobs on average. Similarly, social enterprises invest 27% more than their commercial SME peers in work well-being and staff training. And again, as you're seeing big flows of the workforce, skilling people up and looking after their ability to transfer between roles, sectors, and so on is vital. And most of all, 40% of social enterprises actively employ people who are far from the labour market, whether that's disabled people, young disadvantaged people, or others. And the nice thing about social enterprise is it stays benefiting the local community and the local economy. One of the really powerful things about it is that the money doesn't get diffused kind of everywhere in the UK, but it stays where it benefits the community. So that's why I think social enterprise has a massive role to play in economic recovery and in social justice, and those two things can happen at the same time. But the second thing I'd just like to say is a little less positive, which is we as a sector have not yet done all we should in terms of embedding social justice in our own governance, strategy and operations. And by that, I mean particularly racial justice. And I think the Black Lives Matter movement has highlighted the disparities we see throughout the society. But in our sector, we've got Charity So White and Social Enterprise So White, who are both highlighting similar issues. So for example, while 28% of UnLtd's award winners are BAME leaders, the fact is that across the whole sector, only 9% of staff are BAME and only 2.8% of directors are BAME, which is a woeful performance given its, representative nationally would be 14%. And so we have a lot of work to do, and this kind of idea that we're terribly liberal and progressive and therefore can do no wrong is nonsense. We've got a hell of a lot of work to do to address this injustice in our own organizations and shift power and decision making and resource allocation to communities and individuals who have great talent but have faced major structural barriers. So that's my 2 minutes, probably more than 2 minutes soapbox.
Wow. That's some amazing statistics, Mark. I mean, that really is just mind-blowing, just how serious this topic is and what a wonderful job all of these social enterprises are doing. Let's start with a really fundamental question. The term entrepreneurs has been around since 13th century France. What is it that you believe that's evolved to? How would you define it today, especially with reference to social entrepreneurs?
And I completely agree that entrepreneurship has been around for the longest time. In the 19th century, we had the cooperative movement in Rochdale. This idea that business had a strong purpose and should be for a purpose is long-standing. It's actually only relatively recently, from the 60s on, that the idea that the corporation should be anything other than serving public benefit has emerged. And so I think social entrepreneurship has been around ever since humans have been trying to solve problems, right? Social entrepreneurship, it's just starting up and growing a business that is trying to address and tackle a social issue. And given the scale of the social and environmental issues we face, it's hard to argue that all of us shouldn't be social entrepreneurs.
It's very interesting how we all got started and then got a little sidetracked along the way, maybe. Great tie-in with the conscious capitalism discussion a couple of months ago, or last month rather. Kate Whitewood has asked a really big loaded question, but I think it's a great one in terms of the topic that we're talking about tonight. How do you achieve social justice?
I think the social justice comprises 4 elements: access, equity, rights, and participation. My friend Dave gave me a very useful model around that the other day. And I think if we look at our economy, what we have to think about, and we look at each of the organizations we're responsible for or part of, I think we use that lens of access, equity, rights, and participation, and we need to think about how we can improve on all of those dimensions. I don't think it's a binary phenomenon or a black or white, or you're right or wrong. It's none of that. It's about continually trying to get better. So I don't think there'll be a day where we suddenly say we've achieved social justice. I don't think there'll be a day where we suddenly say, we've addressed every ill in the world. There will always be ills in the world. And what we have to do is continually strive to make things better in a way that is fair and has integrity. And increasingly is obviously needs to be sustainable as well. So I think social justice is something that we can all tackle in our everyday lives and in our businesses. And I think it's about being fair. It's about living with values. I think it's about trying to achieve a higher purpose, a public benefit purpose. And I think it's about acting with integrity.
Well, we've clearly got a long way to go based on the statistics that you started with. Dave, I think you've got a few questions to follow up on that.
Yeah, well, just to open, Mark, and thanks for coming tonight. You talked in your opening about the work that UnLtd supports in food and poverty and housing. And actually, Chris Rawlins has just made mention of you tonight. He said he's watching tonight. He's an UnLtd Impact Award winner, and he says you're an amazing organisation. So I think that's going to cost you a drink. Could you perhaps sort of give an example, or more specifically, about some of the enterprises that you support?
I could use Chris's. He won't be too embarrassed. SoFab Sports. They operate in Gloucestershire, and they it's a sports store, but they sell goods more and more online, actually, and COVID-19 has obviously accelerated that process. But they use that money to educate, skill up, and employ disabled people. And they do lots of fantastic community activities and events as well. And so that's a great example of the kind of organization we're really proud to support in the access to employment space around solutions for an aging society, which, as you mentioned earlier, is another area of focus for us. I'll give another example called Care Calls. And what they're a digital platform that is a phone reminder for an older person, someone over 50, of taking their medication, or it might ring them at 10 p.m. at night to remind them to go to bed, to not fall asleep in front of the television and get cold and sore, to eat their food at a particular time or prepare their food, whatever it might be. And that business, you might think, well, that's just a very simple kind of telephony business. And in some ways it is, but the fact is a public sector partner of that organization saved £1 million through working with them. And they're making 60,000 calls a year now. And those calls can save lives. And so that's just a great use of digital technology, but it's also a technology that works for the older person because it's a telephone call they get, not an email or a text or anything like that. So it works for them as well as being a highly scalable platform.
The inevitable question about the work that UnLtd is doing right now will clash quite clearly with COVID. So I'm going to hit you with two questions which run into each other. One is from Jennifer Allen, who asks, is the role of entrepreneurs even greater in a post-COVID world? And I'm anticipating your answer here because Camillus Hamill says the recent £18.7 million made available for the sector is fabulous, but we're interested to understand what provision for startup social enterprises, what funds exist for BAME run businesses like ours. Discuss.
So you'd guess that I think entrepreneurship is increasingly important, particularly social entrepreneurship. I think it's a fantastic to not just start up an organization, but grow an organization. And I don't mean grow the entity itself, I mean grow its impact. So, often people in the social investment and social entrepreneurship space can get very hooked on scalability of a particular organization. And I'm less worried about that. I'm far more interested in scalability of the solution and the impact that flows from that solution. And you don't necessarily have to have £100 million organization for that. Because if you change policy, for example, Alex Smith of the Cares family has changed UK policy and got a ministerial portfolio around loneliness and increased government spending to combat loneliness. And that's policy provision through committed community work. So that kind of work isn't a massive organization, but it's a massive impact. And that's the sort of thing we have to be really smart about when we think about entrepreneurial activity. It doesn't have to be massive. It could be many, many micro organizations making a difference. But the important thing is that they've got purpose, they've got values, and they've got real intent with a sustainable business model. So yeah, of course, I think entrepreneurship is vital to the recovery, and I think it will ensure that the recovery is a just recovery and a sustainable recovery. And I think we know we need that, right? Everyone understands that that is what we now need. And on Camilla's question, it's a great one. The £18.7 million that we were fortunate to receive from the lottery was for existing social enterprises, so organizations that had been going for a year by March 2020, by the time COVID really affected us. And that's because the argument was we're going to lose so many social enterprises which are already doing great work in communities and have an underlying sustainable business model. And so, of course, it was appropriate for that funding to go to organizations that already have demonstrated that they've got an underlying sustainable business model, as well as delivering great benefit to lives and communities. And on top of that, we need to do exactly what Camilla says, which is stimulate startups, stimulate new business, new social enterprise, and UnLtd's core support, the work from our endowment, we will be using to do that. What I'm really pleased to say on the Black, Asian and minority ethnic community point is that 50% of our awards through the lottery funding, as well as 50% of our awards through our own endowment and operating costs, will go to Black, Asian, minority ethnic and or disabled social entrepreneurs.
That's fantastic. So Mark, Eve Conway is asking a question here, and she's saying, as social entrepreneurs, is your remit to make a profit? Well, of course, any business owner knows they have to make a profit for cash to flow through the business, but she's making the point and asking, is it then to put that back into the community or into the business? So just to be really clear about what that responsibility is if you're a social enterprise, please.
The primary purpose should be purpose, right? The primary goal should be about generating impact. Making a profit is a means to an end. So unless you've got a sustainable business model that turns a profit, you're going to be dependent in some way on charity, on grants, on something other than market-based mechanisms. But to be honest, most social enterprises have hybrid models where a small portion, and as they mature, an increasingly small portion is funded by grants or philanthropy, and an ever-increasing proportion is enabled by earned income. But that's true of commercial business. I mean, think of the bailouts that the airlines have had from government. Right? That's a massive subsidy. And no one questions that those businesses, well, people can question whether they get them, but no one says, oh, that shouldn't happen at all for any business ever. Of course, there's massive government fueling of innovation, of R&D, of different mechanisms of supporting business. And I think that's a really good thing. And I think that should also happen for social enterprise. And I think everyone should be absolutely comfortable and proud of that. In terms of profit redistribution, my sense is for asset lot, for the kind of the technical definition, it's that you will redistribute 51%, so over 50% back into purpose. And I think that's a really healthy goal for an awful lot of organizations. The one thing I'd say is UnLtd has been really proud to support organizations that have a mission lock, but not that asset lock, because they're trying to attract equity investors, and equity investors are not going to take those terms. And so you have to be realistic about what kind of business model you need to scale up your impact. And if your business model requires patient risk-bearing equity, then you are going to have to go for a different model than an asset-locked model if you're going to attract mainstream angel investors and other investors.
Sounds like great advice to social enterprise owners. And of course, you know, you do a lot of work with the owners of these businesses, Mark, and you are yourself a CEO of UnLtd. And, you know, I'm just curious, as the CEO yourself and as a leader, how do you feel this sort of pressure of social justice reflects for you personally as a leader?
It's a really good question. I think about that a lot. I think about, is there more I can be doing? And I think one has to stretch oneself and constantly challenge oneself to see how much one can do. I do that through doing additional things beyond my role at UnLtd. So part of what I wanted to do with the Inclusive Economy Partnership was to see if I could offer more positive kind of impact beyond my core role, so that I'm amplifying the inspiring efforts of social entrepreneurs at a table with government, at a table with big business. We've got Accenture, we've got Unilever, we've got Nationwide in that group. And so it's fantastic to be able to bring to them everything that social entrepreneurs can do. And actually what's really nice about the conversations we have there now is that people understand the power of social entrepreneurs to make change happen. Because if you think about it, what makes change happen anywhere in society, it's to have a spark. You need a catalyst, right? And you need a kind of a fundamental belief in the best of humanity and in what's possible in people, those around you, whether it's your team, the community you serve, your customers, whatever. You need a belief, a really positive belief about the world. And social entrepreneurs embody that. I mean, one of the most fantastic things that I've seen through COVID-19 is that despite some slight delays in getting as much funding as we would want to social entrepreneurs, the amount they've done to flex, to be resilient, to be creative, to mobilize resources, it's so inspiring. And so for me, I find it easy to get incredibly fired up about the work I do day to day. And I want to find ways to see how I can amplify that through mainstream business, through government, and through philanthropy. And that's my personal take on how I try and go above and beyond, I guess, the core role at UnLtd. But all of it has to be in service of the mission that created UnLtd and that brought me into the organization, which is kind of a mission that anyone who cares about purpose and about the best of humanity, I think, would subscribe to. And so I have huge, quite relentless ambition, but it's not ambition for me, it's ambition for the cause.
It sounds, well, Ken McLennan had asked what inspires you, but I think you just answered that question already. It's fantastic. So Dave, over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose in the seesaw of life, Mark, you've got social justice on one side and prosperity on the other. And I think no one would disagree that both are beneficial to life. But surely there's a trade-off. Surely they are at odds with each other. You can't do both.
There certainly can be a trade-off. My contention would be that there doesn't need to be, that you can achieve both. And it may not be the first answer, but you can work your way to a creative solution that achieves both. So for example, you could talk about, I don't know, housing and building new homes and how you need to kind of create new homes and boost the economy, get people taking part in that, but homeless people can't afford those homes, so you're exacerbating a social issue. So you've got this choice: do you kind of look after the homeless people, do you build new homes, or whatever it is? But social housing is the obvious answer that brings those two worlds together and stops this false opposition between social justice and economic recovery. So there are ways that you can do this, and there are very sizable social investment vehicles for affordable social housing with a wraparound of holistic care that enables homeless people to come off the street, to build their confidence, their skills, their sense of agency, their sense of self in a way that works for them, but also enables them to contribute actively to the economy and enables that commercial proposition for an investor to generate a return, because you're saving the public purse money. And so that money can get channeled into the return to the investor. And so there are, I would contend, to almost every challenge, there is a solution that embeds social justice with economic sustainability.
I've got two questions. I'll ask one. I think Nikki will ask the other one. This is like Dr. Mark's surgery here. But first one's from Rita Sen, who is saying, and this is some advice really from you. She says, I wish to explore one or more national projects where we can collectively use our skills as entrepreneurs rather than throwing money at something. And she wants to do it to improve the lives of others in a coordinated way.
Right.
How would you suggest she goes about that?
I don't know if Rita has shared the issue that she's particularly trying to address, or so any issue.
I don't have that, I'm afraid. Sorry.
No. Okay. So my sense is what we found in our work is that a community focused on a shared social issue is really powerful. So in our access to employment work, one of the things that's been really, really beneficial is you've got lots of social entrepreneurs with fantastic individual solutions, but bringing them together so that they learn from one another, they can collaborate from each other, they can build a bundled proposition and go to employers together with that bundled proposition. Those sorts of things only happen when you bring people together and you facilitate that in a thoughtful way. And so I think there are massive benefits to collective efforts from entrepreneurs. And as in any collective process, the first thing you'd want to do is to identify the shared vision. What is the goal that you all really care about? What is that common goal? And then you'd want to understand that what your shared values and principles are. You know, what do you parameters of how you want to work with each other? And then you get into some of the specifics about, well, how do we complement each other? You know, how is what I'm doing different to what you're doing? And how do we therefore combine those so that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts? And so I think with some of those systems thinking disciplines, you can make group entrepreneurship really exciting and powerful. But it starts with a very clear and ambitious shared goal for social change.
Well, that's a very good answer there, Mark. I'm a big fan of collaboration. So, but let's go on to Edward Parker's question. Edward says, as part of my plans to expand my business, I want to recruit a team of motivated people with a focus on recruiting and training people who have mobility issues and difficulty with accessing traditional office-based employment. Do you have any recommendations in terms of recruitment, training, and creating a team office environment, and what pitfalls should I be aware of?
Great question. We're very lucky to have Scope, the National Disability Charity, as one of our partners. And actually Scope came into UnLtd to make sure that our offices were as accessible and inclusive as they could be for disabled people. So there's definitely demand out there. I mean, I think if you're looking for support for what you're doing and it's a sustainable proposition, actually UnLtd would be delighted with you getting in touch, because you could become part of our next Access to Employment Accelerator, because that's exactly the type of organization that we would be delighted to support. So an organization we've backed one of them is called Even Break, and that's a jobs board for disabled people. Another is called Diversity and Ability, and they support particularly higher education institutions around assistive technology, and they do some advisory work around access and inclusion. And so, yeah, we're delighted to back these organizations, and they do fantastic work. And I actually think it's a really powerful model where you're changing the employment practice of an established employer rather than just the model of employing 4 or 5 people yourself, because obviously the leverage if you change an organization that employs 10,000 people is so much greater.
Mark, that's a perfect answer and interesting. And I'd recommend Edward gets in touch with Mark straight away, and we can supply the details, and we'll take commission on that as well. Carolina Gonzalez asks a really interesting question, which is about artificial intelligence and stuff like that. So she's saying this: what is your view on the impact of sharing economies and artificial intelligence platforms for the creation of jobs and alternative working models?
AI is going to have a massive role on the future of work. It is going to create destroy some jobs and shift a whole bunch of other jobs, but it's also going to create some new jobs. I think what it will do, it'll kind of hasten our shift to a different kind of employment pattern, or working pattern rather. And I think we've already seen that through COVID-19, the amount we've been remote working, home working, the flexibility of working patterns. Actually, one of the perverse upsides of the virus has been our flexible response, and therefore us knowing that actually a whole bunch of different modes of work are now possible. I think what's really important as AI comes into play increasingly is that it's used for good, for employment, for kind of creating solutions, as well as us just seeing there being negative externalities from it. So, for example, one of the ventures we back uses AI in its matching up of older people who've got time on their hands and expertise and want to do odd jobs, DIY, gardening, cooking, bit of kind of home help for others in the local area, and in that way to productively use their time and skills to generate some income and to provide a service. And using AI to facilitate employment solutions, for example, that Local Treasures is the organization. It wouldn't be able to do it without AI. And so, yes, of course, AI is going to change work, and it is going to destroy some jobs, but it's also going to be a force for good and to create jobs if we seek to use it that way. And we've got a few ventures who are coming through who are using AI for good, and I think that's really, really exciting.
You've actually addressed another question from Clive Amos, who was asking for more examples of some of the work that UnLtd does, and clearly that's one example which shows the work and the impact that you're having. Nikki.
Yeah, Mark, clearly UnLtd is a purpose-driven organization, and as is Rotary. And I see a lot of overlap in what we're trying to achieve in doing good in the world. But how do you specifically see ways that Rotary can support what you're doing and vice versa? How do you see us working together?
Well, Rotary taps into the best of people in much the way I was trying to describe earlier, that I think social entrepreneurs do as well. And I think you have an extraordinary network with skills, energy, know-how, expertise. And if you think of any budding entrepreneur, the value of that expertise, those connections, that social capital, but the ideas, the knowledge, I mean, it's just phenomenal. And so, I'm sure there are ways that we we've backed 20,000 social entrepreneurs over the last 17 years. You've got your network of Rotarians throughout the UK and Ireland. And I think, there's all sorts of ways that we can explore mentoring, pro bono support, leveraging social capital locally, hubs that we might do together. Building on your fantastic work around entrepreneurship hubs. I think there's an enormous amount that could be done. Also, if Rotarians are so minded, to be angel investors and so forth, and kind of to get behind social entrepreneurs. One of the really fantastic things about social entrepreneurship is you can either be a social entrepreneur, or you can buy from social enterprises, or you can back social enterprises. So just think be, buy, or back, and any Rotarian can be, buy, or back, right? And I think it's such a, as you said, Nikki, it's such a beautiful alignment of values, the ethos of Rotarians and the ethos of social entrepreneurs and those who want to find, fund and support them seems beautifully aligned. And so I always believe that those kind of collaborations make a lot of sense.
Couldn't agree more. You got a quick one, Dave?
Yeah, Mark, you always get a question at the end of one of these webinars, which is going to be a really good 5-minute discussion point. So you've got 60 seconds on this one. And it's a really good one from Roger Garit, who says, Mark, you mentioned that you spent some time in the non-profit business area. So I just wonder, is that not piggybacking on businesses who are making a profit?
When I talk about non-profits, I'm talking about charities and so forth. And so, Bill and Melinda Gates, you could say that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is piggybacking off Microsoft, but actually it was Bill and Melinda Gates's choice to set up that foundation with their personal wealth. I don't see that as piggybacking. I see that as a phenomenal expression of human endeavor. And so, no, I don't see that.
Okay, so Mark, it's been wonderful, all of these responses, and thanks to our audience for some fantastically thought-provoking questions too. So now we've got to that point where we go to your 3 takeaways, if we can. So if you can give the audience specifically 3 points about social justice and entrepreneurship and things they can act on as a result of tonight's conversation, please.
Great. So I'm going to use the be, buy, back model for this. So be social entrepreneurs in everything you do. So whatever organization you're in, you can be a social entrepreneur. You can be an entrepreneur in doing that. You can be an entrepreneurial owner. But combine purpose with sustainable economics in your core life, and the world will be better. So B, that's the first. Buy, whenever you're buying anything, think about social enterprises and think about how your purchasing, your consumption can benefit planet and people. Don't see it as an either or, see it as a way that you can both get the product and the service you want and deserve, and that people and planet can benefit. And in backing, I'd say, and I think this is more to the kind of the racial justice or the anti-racism kind of perspective, I think we all need to go out of our way to find talented Black, Asian, minority ethnic colleagues to enable them to shift power over to them and to just kind of make sure that our workplaces are a better environment and become a richer environment by being truly diverse and inclusive.
Mark, that's brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for those takeaways and giving our audience a pizza of advice on the way forward with social entrepreneurship. And coming so soon after last month's webinar from Roy Spencer on conscious capitalism, it really shows that these webinars help to open minds and inform. So, Mark, thank you very much for being with us this evening.
Thank you so much, Nikki and Dave. Been a pleasure.
Thank you, Mark. So as a reminder, if you've missed any of the Together Talks over the past few months, they are available for you to download on the Rotary in Great Britain and Ireland YouTube channel, where we would like to invite you to like, subscribe and share right under the screen here.
You've got the finger action right on there. We have one more Together Talks left this month, and it's a biggie. You may have seen the news last Friday that Captain Tom Moore was knighted by Her Majesty the Queen in a special ceremony at Windsor Castle. And next Tuesday, we'll be welcoming Captain Tom and with a special video interview. And joining us live will be his daughter, Hannah Ingram Moore.
As many of you know, Captain Tom was a Rotarian in Cambridgeshire and a member of Roundtable in his hometown of Keighley in Yorkshire. He raised more than 32 million for NHS charities during the daily walk at his Bedfordshire home on the eve of his 100th birthday. So we're looking forward to welcoming Captain Tom and Hannah to hear more about the Captain Tom Foundation.
Yeah, and hear what he said when I asked him if he's going to do another walk next year. Interesting. Anyway, that's next Tuesday, 1905. And then on August the 18th, we've got a one-off special, maybe an hour, have to negotiate that with Nikki if I'm allowed to stay out that late. We'll be welcoming Max Johnson and his parents, Emma and Paul. Max received a life-saving heart transplant, aged just 9 years old 3 years ago. And also joining us on the program will be Loanna and Joe Ball, the parents of Kira Ball, who was just 9 when she was killed in a car crash, and she gave her heart to Max. As a result, both sets of parents have been very active in campaigning for Kira and Max's law, which came into operation this April, and that has changed the whole landscape of organ donation. So that's on Tuesday, August the 18th. Please put it in your diaries, because I think it would be well worth a watch. It promises to be an emotional and an informative session, and you'll have an opportunity to put your questions to both families.
Well, so thank you so much for joining us tonight, and we hope you'll be here next Tuesday to see Captain Sir Tom. So it's good night from Dave, and it's good night from me. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for everything.